I grew up in a coastal town till I was around 25 years old. The beach was roughly a 20-minute walk from my area. My personality was largely influenced by the seashore, I'd say. It would be unusual for me to shake out a pair of shoes without any sand falling out because I've been surfing for longer than I can remember. Let's name my two best buddies, Armin and Chuck, extroverted, gregarious, and charming. At 18, we were all completely fixated on girls. It was a Saturday evening in the latter part of May, right before the end of classes. Removed. By now, senioritis had taken hold, and my buddies and I were always pushing the boundaries of what we could get away with. Acquiring. We didn't care about high school anymore because we were in trouble and had already received our COVID college acceptances. Armand and I were going to meet up with two girls we'd been seeing from our high school. Well, in school as well. It was the intention to pick up the two of them in the evening and spend a breezy, cool night at the beach. We had many bottles of wine and blankets. The ideal pairings for a stargazing beachside. To be clear, I don't support drinking and driving in any way, but I was a foolish child. I got to Sophia's place shortly after 9 o'clock. She kind of strolled, sort of danced, to the car with France. They had had a little something to drink in advance. I flashed an enthusiastic grin at Armand. It was gonna be one of those. I once drove to a picturesque beach along a picturesque route. Throughout, the drive took roughly 30 minutes. In the car, the four of us were laughing heartily and chatting about some mutual friends. My friend and I were having a very philosophical discussion about the meaning of time, mortality, and other things about 1 o'clock. We're all having a great time together. There was a dirt route leading up to the particular beach I had selected. We would go along a narrower stretch of sand. We were less likely to come across other people in such a remote location, even if the path was very steep. Moreover, this beach was farther from the main boardwalk, meaning that stargazing might be possible under a clear sky. I considered every possibility. I put my car in the park. The four of us got out as far up the gravel road as we could. I carried the wine and the blankets with Armand. I'll use an empty bottle and fast forward through the uninteresting parts after a few hours. I found Armand and I drifting apart. Sophia and I moved in the opposite direction from him and Fran as they strolled up the beach. We fell asleep on top of it after we had been separated by a respectable amount of darkness and distance. I threw down my blanket at that point. Yet Sophia stiffened up before anything could happen. She murmured something to me, and at first I assumed it was something I had done. I closed my eyes and strained my hearing, listening for sounds other than the soft lapping of waves in the ocean. To my amazement, I heard something that sounded almost like a little motor whirring, a sound I would normally associate with intoxication. I was unable to locate the source of the sound because it seemed to be moving around. After that, it appeared to vanish into thin air. It is insignificant. I gave her my word. Want to get back to our previous activities. Shortly after I finished pulling my shirt out of the sand, we did just that, shaking it out before tossing it over my head. Sophia shrieked at that moment while still resting on the blanket. As I turned to face her, I noticed that she was pointing up at something. I raised my head, but all I could see was the pitch-black sky. I sat down beside her so I could get a better view, and I saw horror from her perspective. What seemed like a drone drifting straight overhead was perfectly aligned with the moon. It lingered for a short time longer before soaring high into the night sky and vanishing from view. Everything made sense. The drone was making the noise that we had noticed before. I became upset with myself for not realizing it earlier. The idea of being observed that entire time made me nauseous. I noticed Sophia had the same impression as I cast a quick peek in her direction. She buried her face in her hands and began to cry. I offered her my best consolation and proposed that we take a stroll back to the car. When the two of us arrived at the car, Armand and Fran were already inside. I gave a brief explanation of the circumstances. I could feel the excitement being taken out of the air as the two of them were left stunned. I started out driving in silence in the direction of Sophia's house before attempting to break the tension with a little banter. However, it didn't work. The girls concurred that they weren't quite comfortable returning home. I felt fine with going out late because it was a Saturday night. I inquired about our ability to hang out in any of their homes. Shaking their heads, they both said that their parents wouldn't permit it. Armin's and my homes were off limits for the same reason. I decided to have a German call Chuck, which he carried out. Chuck's parents were quite laid back, and his enormous home was truly ideal place. We were thrilled to see Chuck free. After entering Chuck's driveway, I parked the car there. I promised Armand and the two girls that I would catch up to them quickly as they started to go in the direction of Chuck's front door. It took me a moment to process all that had just transpired. I put my face against the driving wheel, closed my eyes, and tried to calm myself since I was more riled up than I was letting on. To be honest, though, those little moments of closed eyes were incredibly beneficial. I reached for my phone, which I hadn't even touched since the incident, out of instinct. The single notification that was sitting on the screen caught my attention when the screen brightened up. I had to check that I wasn't dreaming by blinking a few times. I was so terrified of the low notification AirTag I found moving with you that my whole body froze. All the feelings I had just forced out of my body returned with a bang. It was tracking us. I broke free from my immobility and leaped out of the automobile, inspecting every part of it. Nothing in the grille, nothing on the back, and nothing on the front bumper. In a desperate attempt, I turned over the floor mats and checked the seats. Nothing yet. I could feel the hairs on my arms and legs by this point, and I was dripping sweat down my neck. Securing. I got up, crawled on all fours, and started looking under my car. When I reached the driver's side tire, I started to feel around it. And there it was, literally taped to the bottom of the well. If you didn't know what to look for, you couldn't locate it. I tossed the tag to the ground and broke it into bits after holding it in my palm for a little while. We knew where we were because someone had used the drone to spy on us on the beach. Alone in Chuck's driveway, I didn't feel comfortable. I hurried to Chuck's front door after picking up one of the shattered pieces of the AirTag. I showed the AirTag bits to everyone while I explained what I had found. The girls in particular were even more appalled than I was. The identical notification was shown when they checked their phones. Chuck was especially irate since, once the fear subsided, we might have been traced back to his house. We ended up sleeping in Chuck's basement for the next few weeks, during which time nothing happened. To be honest, my friends and I were relieved to put the entire incident behind us, figuring it had happened long ago. Right now, we could only conclude that it was the work of some stalker who wanted to scare some young folks by watching them hook up on the beach and track their automobile. Though it was unsettling to consider, we were happy that things hadn't become worse. About 3 weeks after the incident, on a Sunday morning, I received a call from Chuck. He begged me over the phone to get in the car and head to his place right away, and I did. He had some paper in his hand and a worried expression on his face when I arrived at his driveway. Before I recognized what he was holding, I was perplexed. They were pictures instead of paper. I took a closer look at them. Photos of me taken on the beach that evening. Even though they were fuzzy and poorly lit, Sophia was easily visible, and I'm going to give it away. Fervor. I felt repulsed. I could only imagine Sophia's reaction when she found out. We called the police and explained the scenario because we had no idea what to do. We insisted that they at least scan the images for prints, even though they said there wasn't anything they could do. When they finally responded to us, they said that the pictures revealed nothing. Like me, Sophia was afraid that whoever sent them would try to use her as a pawn. It was an extremely traumatic event. Fortunately, that was the last time anything went wrong, most likely because we had called the police. I can't blame her for that, but given what happened, I can't completely feel the same around her. All I can do is hope those photos don't surface at some point in the future. I was 19 and Ricardo was my best buddy. To put it mildly, my partner and I are from wealthy backgrounds in North Jersey, and we spend our summers at the Jersey Shore. His home is in Lavallette, and mine is in Belmar, New Jersey. On a random weeknight in the summer, Ricardo was taking the two of us from my Belmar home to Lavallette, which was approximately an hour's drive away. To be perfectly honest, I liked spending time at Ricardo's place better than Lavalette's, not just because it was a little cozier, but also because Lavalette tends to cater more to children our age. Unless we were searching the neighborhood for a party. On one of the several private beaches that we aren't strictly allowed to be on, we can have a few drinks. I could go on forever discussing things to do on the shore, but I'll do my best to keep it brief. Obtain. We decided on a more sedate evening as we were traveling down, no partying or other activities that we might usually partake in. We made plans to get some drinks, roll a joint, and watch a show under the stars on one of the exclusive beaches. It sounded amazing, to be honest. With a few of our other pals, the two of us had been getting along very well. For anybody not familiar with Lavalette's layout, a respite from the partying was much needed. There are two areas, Bayside and Beachside. The majority of the beaches have a very tall dune that drops off sharply as it gets closer to the water. You would notice a really large heap of sand if you were to stand at the edge of the ocean and look back. We grabbed several bikes from Ricardo's garage and rode toward the beach of our choosing after enjoying a few drinks at his apartment. I wasn't sure why, but Ricardo insisted on traveling farther than I had ever gone, even though all the beaches were essentially the same. But I just accepted the lengthier bike ride as I didn't dislike it. In the end, Ricardo chose a lonely-looking beach at the end of the drive that was clear of traffic. All the houses down the street were dark. I thought this was better. This was in the past before marijuana became legal in New Jersey, and we were afraid of getting caught. Plus, even though we were just 19, we did bring some alcohol with us. We rode our bikes toward the shore, crashing them under some bushes. Except for the mild waves coming from the ocean, the two of us lit up our J and smoked under the stars. And the accompanying clothes. The sand felt cool under our feet and the beach spread for miles in all directions. The two of us filled the air with laughing and talking as we grew more and more inebriated. In the end, we just relaxed in the sand and gazed up into the starry sky, hoping to spot a shooting star. It was then that we heard it. It was originally heard by me. It was essentially imperceptible. There was a metallic buzzing sound, similar to what you could hear in a huge gymnasium with bright overhead lighting. There isn't a better way for me to explain the sound. There was a subtle, metallic hum that the beach couldn't possibly be the source of. I could tell the instant Ricardo began to hear it too as I sat up and looked at him. We both jerked our heads in all directions, searching the shadows for the drone's origin. It was odd how hard it was to pinpoint the exact location of the sound. Simply put, it was too dim to tell. We were starting to feel frightened and were too scared to move. We figured whatever was causing the noise would eventually go away and we wouldn't need to be concerned. Approximately. There was just no possibility that our location on that beach could be seen. It was far too dark. And whatever noises we were making were drowned out by the sound of the water. Although it may not seem very frightening, I would be lying if I said my heart wasn't racing. After a few more minutes, the drone kept going and Ricardo motioned for me to follow him. I gave a nod of assent. Like in a movie scene, leading was unquestionably the greatest choice. The droning increased from 1 to 5 the instant the two of us stood up. I had to fight every last bit of self-control not to scream and get scared. It was not a slow transition. In an instant, the sound grew louder and more distinct, and it was coming from our right. Fear swept over me, causing the hairs on my neck to rise and tensing my body from head to toe. We kept looking into the darkness, but we were unable to see anything. Now, though, the drone's sound was so near that we found ourselves running toward the dune out of instinct. I had no idea what we were fleeing from. All I knew was that we were being pursued by someone or something and that something was very wrong. I felt Ricardo put a firm hand on my shoulder as we were almost at the crest of the dune, unexpectedly stopping my pace. I was perplexed at first until I noticed what was capturing his attention. I saw as I cast my eyes up toward the dune. At the top of the dune stood a shadowy figure that did not move. Its arms were abnormally lengthy, nearly reaching its knees. I was astounded by how it stood, as it was absurdly tall. Even yet, it was very horrifying. Ricardo's yell reached me, causing me to look away from the apparition. And we ran on, this time staying parallel to the shore. We bolted up the hill to the next dune entrance. We turned to face the summit and took one last glance at where we had been recently arrived from. I still vividly recall the horrifying scene that appeared next. Along with the shadowy figure that remained on its fate, there appeared to be 3 or 4 other people standing motionless on the incline. They all appeared to be facing away from us. We decided to run the entire distance because we didn't have time to return to our bikes. We went back home the following morning and tried again, but we could not for the life of us find those motorcycles. Perhaps they had been taken. Alternatively, it could have something to do with whoever or whatever was following us the previous evening. In any case, I've never had a scarier beach trip, and I still find it difficult to explain the majority of these incidents. The most peculiar thing. For my part, I was never able to identify the buzzing drone and haven't heard anything that even faintly resembles it to this day. I've always been afraid of beaches. Alright, not all the time. My beliefs directly contribute to my fear. As a child, to tell you, I used to adore the beach. Many summers were spent looking forward to the weekend when my family and I would spend time at our beach house, or even better if I was lucky and they let me spend it at my friend Charles's beach house. This was one of those unique summer weekends when I was 16. Charles, Riley, and myself, our third friend. We are heading to Charles' beach house in Long Beach for a few unsupervised days. Riley was going to drive down in his car. He was a year older than Charles and me and had just received his driver's license. It was an amazing drive down. Riley's driving at the time was very clumsy, so most of the ride was spent making fun of him. It was wonderful, swerving and hating the road. We arrived at LBI early and promptly transported all of our belongings from the car to the rooms we would be staying in. I'll talk briefly about the house's layout because it plays a significant role in the narrative. There's a front door, a back sliding door, a garage door that opens from the back to the front yard, and a back deck that connects the bedrooms upstairs. Additionally, a spiral staircase makes it possible to go from the back deck to the ground level, making it possible to enter and exit the house from the upstairs. The rear of the home faces a little water channel because it is situated beside the lagoon, with residences across the street. Yes, we were old enough to believe that chasing females was our top priority, and having a private beach house was the ideal setting for that. We talked to the females on Snapchat for a few hours after determining which ones were at the beach. We eventually located 3 adorable gals who stated they would be happy to come back and kick back at Charles's residence. We'd gotten a few bottles of our folks, and I had more than enough cannabis to last us the whole weekend. Before departing, it was ideal with alcohol. Everything was going great. We 3 could see that Rosie, Alexa, and Sophie were flirtatious and lively. Where, most likely, the night would end. The 6 of us decided to smoke in Charles' backyard pool at 1 o'clock. Though modest, it was ideal for 6 inebriated children. I have clear memories of the scene. With the gentle breeze from the bay flowing through my hair, I could feel the steam rising from the hot water and the puffs of smoke coming from my joints. This was pure delight at our age. However, without warning, Charles muted the music completely and peered into the lagoon's blackness beyond my shoulder. Perplexed, I pivoted and peered into the shadows. Though I wasn't entirely clear what Charles was looking at, I could make out the houses across the lagoon. When one of the girls questioned Charles about why he had turned down the music, he muttered that he had noticed someone standing on the pier across from the home. I burst out laughing, figuring he was playing us. I answered, "Who cares, bro? People live here." Charles gave a head shake. "I know that family. According to my parents, they are spending a week in Florida." I kept laughing because, to be honest, I still felt it was a joke or that it wasn't a huge problem. It was the girls. However, they expressed a slight sense of fear and desire to return inside. The 6 of us began leaving the pool because I wasn't going to argue. Riley leaped and swore as we dried off in the yard, staring out over the lagoon. The others and I turned to see what appeared to be activity coming from the opposite dock, despite the low light. The 6 of us stopped in place, attempting to gain a clearer picture of what we were seeing, but the image was illuminated by a passing automobile on the street across from us. It was frightening to see, just so slightly. For towering figures were positioned at the edge of the dock, facing our direction. Though it was hard to determine what they looked like or what they were wearing, it was certain that they were facing in our direction. With a trembling voice, Charles motioned for us to go to the sliding door. "Go inside now." I heard something different as we dashed inside, and it's still the scariest sound I've ever heard. For splatters came from behind us in quick succession. Those guys were traversing the lagoon by swimming. By then, we were fully in panic mode. Riley locked the sliding door and slammed it shut while the girls shouted. The six of us hurried to the chamber that was hidden from view from the outside, while Charles hurried to the front to lock that door as well. Terrified of what we could hear next, we waited in silence. After a few minutes, nothing happened at all, and we were appropriately cursed to discover that he had neglected to shut the sliding door. Charles began to lose his cool on the deck, realizing that this house was about to be broken into. The final straw came when we heard gentle, soft footsteps above us. Since none of us had any weapons on us and we were all drunk, our only real choice was to flee. Riley cranked up the car as the six of us ran for the front door and jumped in. Riley damaged Charles's mailbox on his way out of the driveway because the craziness of it all got to him. We contacted the police as soon as we were sufficiently away. It was a horrific experience. After the police had searched the house, we returned, but the news was devastating. Not the worst thing was that all the treasures on the top floor were gone. The medium-sized Boston whaler boat that belonged to the Charles family was also taken, probably as a getaway car. Charles's father usually kept an extra set of keys in a little hatch. I'm still curious about how the perpetrators knew where the key was buried beneath the steering wheel, which is where the police decided to explain how they left so swiftly. The culprits have never been taken into custody by the authorities, and we never will. Riley, Charles. Furthermore, I believe that the person who robbed the house may have known the Charles family and knew where the key and the house were supposed to be. That weekend it was also vacant. Even though it has been a while since this terrifying incident, I still make sure to lock all of the doors and windows in my house. Lock your doors at night, and do yourself a favor,